The story begins with Dazai Osamu, who is a depressed middle-aged man with nothing to look forward to in life, so he gives up and decides to end it all. On a cold rainy day, Dazai and his lover are seen walking together without an umbrella until they arrive at a clearing the raging river. This is exactly what Dazai was hoping for, since the rain made the river strong enough to sweep a person away, and right now, he wants to be that person. He and Sakchan came here today because they are sick of this world and plan Isekai themselves by drowning in the river cocoon together. This way they will be able to keep the promise to always be together, so before they jump in, they tie their arms together in solidarity. However, as we all know, there is only one true king of Isekai, and he isn't going to let his job get stolen, so despite them being in the middle of the forest, Track-kun shows up out of nowhere to take them out before River-kun does, even if it doesn't make much sense. In the next moment, Dazai wakes up in a cathedral, and as he gets up, he's greatly confused by everything he sees around him, but he just assumes this must be the world people get sent to after they die. The style is different from what he's used to, but he will get used to it eventually. Just then, a voice calls out to him and explains to Dazai that he has been summoned here as the hero of this world. The woman's name is Annette, and she says she is tasked with guiding those who ended up here, to prove that this is indeed another world. She directs them to look out this window as a dragon and various other mythical creatures are seen roaming around in the world of Zauberberg. She tells Dazai that he's destined to become the hero of this world and restore the light, but he doesn't seem too happy about it. He wanted one thing, and that was to die alongside his lover Sakchan, but not only did he end up in a fantasy adventure instead, Sakchan isn't even here with him, so he feels like he's broken his promise to die with her. Oh well, that just means he has to try dying again, so Dazai swallows drugs, an entire bottle of pills, and patiently waits for the sweet embrace of death by overdose. Annette freaks out after seeing Dazai poison himself, so she immediately begins using magic to detoxify his body, but as Dazai regains consciousness, he tells her to stop trying to save him because it's really inconvenient. She doesn't listen to him and asks Dazai to stand up so he can fulfill his mission as this world's savior. However, Dazai doesn't even want to save himself, much less a random world that he just ended up in. He never asked to end up here in the first place, but this surprises Annette, so she asks if he happened to get hit by a truck. Dazai recalls a brief encounter with a truck, so Annette explains that she hired Truck-kun to Isekai people here as part of the service she offers. The way it works is simple. Truck-kun finds someone who is depressed or deeply unhappy with their life, which is why he usually camps outside League of Legends tournaments, but after he has run over his target, they get sent to this world and get a second chance to live a happy life, and they usually end up feeling better. The fact that Dazai got run over means he must have been really unhappy with his life, so she doesn't see why you wouldn't be excited for a second chance. While she may be right about Dazai's old life being miserable, that doesn't mean he's going to be any happier in this world. In fact, he's pretty pissed that Annette and her Isekai service ruined what was meant to be the perfect conclusion to his story. All they wanted was to spend his last moments of life with his lover, but she had to go and ruin it for him. Annette can't believe Dazai is so upset with her, but she's not worried about it since he will surely change his opinion once he did see his awesome stats. However, as she opens the stat window, she's shocked to see that Dazai possesses abysmally low health and mana. In fact, his health is so low that he would probably die from a stiff breeze in his current state. Annette refuses to believe Dazai is so weak, so she checks to see if he has some kind of broken ability to balance out his weak stats, but as she opens his ability window, she finds out that Dazai has no skills at all, aside from Depression level 5. Dazai is basically a glass cannon, but with no cannonballs, so Annette doesn't know what to do with him since something like this has never happened before. Dazai decides to leave the cathedral since there's nothing left for him here, but Annette feels the need to make up for her mistake, so she grabs Dazai's hand and apologizes for having him brought to this world, since he wasn't meant to come here. She unfortunately doesn't have the power to send him back to Earth, but she can't let him go and live by himself, either, since he wouldn't last 10 minutes outside with his current stat points. Dazai isn't surprised to learn that he's incredibly weak, since no matter where he goes he has always been a failure, and Annette apologizes once more for her mistake and pleads with Dazai to stay in the cathedral for the time being, since it's not safe for him to go outside. With his current stats he would just end up getting snatched by a dragon or something, so she thinks it's in his best interest to wait before he does anything dangerous. Dazai thanks her for worrying about him, but he says her concern isn't needed since he is just looking for a place to die. Hearing him say this leads Annette to think that you may actually be different from all the others. When she first took this job, she was genuinely excited to guide the summon heroes on their journeys, but since most of them were depressed league players, they were so annoying to be around that she ended up hating her job. Her tasks can basically devolve into ego stroking the heroes to get them to accept the mission, but it's different with Dazai. As he's about to walk out, Annette drops her staff and chases after Dazai, pleading with him to at least pick a profession before he leaves, but Dazai turns to her and says there's no need for that since he's a natural-born writer, and that's all he will ever be. With that, he closes the door behind himself and says goodbye to Annette, and once Dazai is gone, Annette falls to the floor and begins thinking about how Dazai is the exact kind of person she has been waiting for. Meanwhile, Dazai has made it to some plains outside and is trying to get directions from a sign, but he doesn't understand a single word on it, so he just goes back to popping pills. Just then, he hears a voice saying he's just spotted a landmark, so 5 points of experience have been awarded. He may just be high off the pills, but you'd swear that sound just came from his head, and it really hurts since he suffers from migraines, so he tries to get it to stop. However, celebration music goes off in his head as he has now gone up to level 2, and the resulting migraines make him want to die and more. Just then, he hears a girl screaming for help nearby, so he turns around and sees the girl getting assaulted by a death tree. She notices Dazai and asks him to help her since she'll be killed by the tree if she doesn't escape soon, and the tree seems to be wrapping her in his branches more and more by the second. Dazai just stands there as the tree fondles the girl, and he seems to be enjoying the show so much, so that he asks her if she's okay about him writing a novel about this later, but the girl doesn't care about any novels and just wants Dazai to rescue her already. To his credit, Dazai gives it his best shot, but he can't reach her at all, so he just gives up. So the tree grabs him by the neck and hangs him up next to the girl. There's nothing he can do about it now, so Dazai just introduces himself to the girl while he's hanging and says they're probably not going to last much longer. The girl blames Dazai for their predicament since he couldn't do anything to stop the death tree, and now that they have been captured, the death tree is going to use its suction ability to suck out all the nutrition from their bodies, so the next few minutes they're guaranteed to be dead. Dazai says he's happy to hear that, but this freaks the girl out because what kind of lunatic wants to die by getting himself sucked dry? As Dazai starts feeling weak, he looks like he's about to bust before suddenly slumping over. The girl starts to panic thinking Dazai has actually died, but moments later, the branch that was strangling Dazai begins to wither away, and the death tree ends up being destroyed because of it. The girl and Dazai are freed as the tree disintegrates, but Dazai is disappointed that you failed to die again. Thanks to his inadvertent victory, Dazai levels up again, and the girl is left confused and amazed, because she believes Dazai intentionally made the death tree die by absorbing the poison in his body, but she also finds it weird that Dazai would poison himself to begin with. She thanks Dazai for saving her while also apologizing for calling him useless earlier, but he doesn't think he did anything special. All he managed to do was fail to die, and he isn't happy about it in the slightest. The girl doesn't understand why Dazai is depressed, but he saved her life, so she sincerely wants to thank him. She suddenly has an idea and invites Dazai to come over to her house, so she can express her gratitude properly, and Dazai sees no issue with this, so as the girl extends her hand and asks what she should call him, so he says she can call him Sensei. However, as he grabs her hand, he's reminded of Sakchan, and that gets him to wonder if she might have ended up in this world as well, and if that's the case then he might be able to find and reunite with his love. He has finally found a reason to stay alive in this world, so he will make sure he finds Sakchan no matter where he is in the world, and when he does they'll finally be able to die together. His motives may be questionable, but at least he's not actively trying to die anymore. With that said, he has no idea where to even start looking, so he heads back to Annette's cathedral, and Annette is overjoyed that he decided to come back to her, so she can finally shoot her shot. However, as the cat girl he was up behind Sensei, Annette freezes in shock because she hadn't thought Sensei would find a woman so soon after going outside for the first time. He says he has a question to ask Annette, so she prepares herself, thinking he wants to ask about her, but Sensei says he wants to find a girl named Sakchan, so he was hoping Annette might have some information on that. Annette is disappointing that Sensei is asking about another woman, but she doesn't have any good clues about where Sakchan might be, so Sensei is back to the drawing board. Since he has nowhere to go, he follows the cat girl to her house. The girl tells Sensei to cheer up since there is still plenty of time for him to find Sakchan. Since her house is so pretty far away, she suggests they should stop at the castle town of Roth so they can take a break. She then holds his hands so that she can lead him there. However, Annette is also here for some reason and she will stand for such unholy behavior while they are out in public. The cat girl yells at it and for smacking her hand over something as trivial as hand holding. While she's on the topic of yelling at her, she questions why Annette is here in the first place, since it's not normal for a clergy to feel the need to abandon her post and follow people all the way out here. Annette doesn't really want to explain herself, but from the way she's looking at Sensei, the cat girl can already tell that she's in love with him. Annette denies having such impure intentions and claims that she is just here to watch over the weak otherworlder that she mistakenly summoned. As soon as the cat girl realizes that Sensei is from another world, she finally understands why he was so strong back when he saved her. Annette doesn't believe what the cat girl says since she saw Sensei's stats personally, and she knows for a fact that he has less health than a Make-A-Wish kid. The cat girl still asserts that Sensei must be strong since he was able to defeat a death tree and save her life in the process, but this is terrible news for Annette since Sensei saving the cat girl's life is the first step to developing a romance. She can't believe she's already losing her chance to cat girl. While they've been bickering this whole time, Sensei found something really interesting. It's a coffin that's the perfect size for him, so he climbs inside and says he has been feeling dizzy ever since he came here, so he's going to take a nap for a while, and they should wake him up when they get to the town. After that, he says goodnight to Annette and the cat girl, but the cat girl is mad that he still isn't calling her by her name, so Annette jokes that Sensei likes her more because he can actually remember her name. After that, Annette cheerfully ties a rope to the coffin Sensei is sleeping in and begins dragging it away. The cat girl asks if Annette should really be doing all this since she's supposed to be a clergy person of the cathedral, but Annette is too busy trying to pull the coffin until the rope eventually snaps. As they continue walking, cat girl Tama gets tired of having to drive a coffin around, so she asks Sensei to get out and walk on his own 2 feet. However, there is no response, so she starts worrying that Sensei might have actually died somehow. Annette checks his stats and Sensei seems to be fine, so he must just be asleep. They are pretty close to the castle anyway, so Annette asks Tama to just bear with it for a little longer so they don't have to wake him up. Meanwhile, inside the coffin, Sensei is peacefully dreaming about his beloved Sakshan, and no matter where she is, he will make sure he finds her, so they can both die together. A while later, they finally arrived at the castle town of Roth, so Annette and Tama open the coffin to let Sensei out. Sensei takes a look around the town and he is now thoroughly convinced that he isn't in the same world anymore. Before they do anything, Annette says they should go to the castle and have an audience with the king, but they end up leaving the coffin in the middle of the road. Over the castle, King Thomas and his daughter Charlotte are happy to meet them, and since they must be exhausted from such a long journey, he offers to let them all rest in the castle chambers for the night. But before that, he would love to hear some of Sensei's pleasant experiences. Sensei can't think of many pleasant things to talk about, but he did enjoy the coffin right here, so he tells the king that he will teach him what it feels like to sleep in a coffin. Out of context, that clearly sounded like a threat, but Annette quickly changes the subject and compliments Charlotte on how beautiful she is. The king mentions that Charlie is actually getting married soon, so he asks them for a little advice regarding Charlotte's suitors. Thomas calls for the men to be brought in, so we are introduced to the warrior Gomez and the wandering minstrel of love Otto. Recently, due to the influence of the wrath of the demon lord, the activity of monsters has greatly increased recently. However, Thomas has grown too old to deal the problem himself, so he decides that one of these two shall become Charlotte's husband and the next king of Roth. However, Charlotte doesn't seem to be on board with the idea since she hasn't chosen a husband yet. That's why he's leading the choice up to a bunch of strangers he met 10 minutes ago. He wants them to pick who is more suitable to marry Charlotte between Gomez and Otto, but as the choice prompt shows up and Sensei does the sensible thing and says he has never met these men in his life. Charlotte's future hinges on this decision, so he thinks it's dumb to entrust it to a bunch of strangers like this, and if this is something he would do without a second thought, then he's not fit to be king. The king has left in shock, and after saying that Sensei turned to leave while Annette and Natama frantically tried to apologize for Sensei's actions, they tried to explain that Sensei from another world, so he's a bit blunt at times, but the king says it's fine since he isn't the type to hold a grudge, and Charlotte seems to have taken an interest in him. That night, while everyone else is asleep, Sensei spends his time looking out the window, so Annette gets up and asks him if he's having trouble falling asleep, so Sensei tells her that he just never sleeps well. Annette wants to take the opportunity to learn more about Sensei, so she asked him to tell her about Sakshan, but then she notices a tail pop out from under Sensei's sheets, so she takes the covers off and sees Thomas sleeping on Sensei's thighs. She won't stand for such debauchery unless she's the one who gets to sleep with sensei, so she just a pillow to smack Tama and wake her up. Tama defends herself by saying it's cold and she's part cat, so it's totally normal for her to cuddle at the people for warmth. While Annette and Tama continue arguing over this, Sensei they gets up and leaves the room because of all the noise, and as he steps out into the hallway, he notices a beautiful light, so he goes out to look the lake, and coincidentally, Charlotte is out here as well. Once she notices Sensei, she invites him to watch the lake with her since it's a beautiful night. Sensei agrees that the sight is very beautiful, so beautiful in fact that it makes him feel like drowning in the lake. Charlotte is shocked to hear him say this and asks if Sensei has enough problems to make him want to drown himself, but from what Sensei has seen so far, Charlotte seems a lot more trouble than him. After some silence, Charlotte confides in Sensei that she hasn't been able to make a decision between Gomez and Otto. Gomez is only recently arrived at the castle, where he is already the most reliable of their soldiers. Her father has faith in Gomez's strength, so she feels like she should probably choose him, but Otto was her childhood friend, and whenever she feels down, he would always write a song and play it to make her feel better. She doesn't know whether to choose a husband who she loves or one who would be the strongest king for the sake of her father. Sensei laughs himself a little and says Charlotte is truly kind for worrying about what her father thinks to this extent, unlike Sensei, who has attempted to cancel his subscription to Life several times, always inconveniencing his family in the process. However, he has never once let someone else decide how he would live his life. He thinks Charlotte should make a decision based on what she wants, and to do that, she must figure out what her true desires are. The next day, King Thomas is called Sensei and the others in the throne room again, and he apologizes for the inconvenience, but he called them here because Charlotte has finally decided who she will marry, so he wants them to act as a witness to her choice. Annette thinks Charlotte will surely marry Gomez since she's likely to put the needs of the kingdom above her own, while Tama thinks Otto is a much better mock for her. Thomas tells Charlotte to go up to the man she has chosen to speak her vows to him, so Charlotte begins walking. However, instead of turning to Otto or Gomez, she grabs hold of Sensei's hand and says she wishes to drown in the lake with him. No one can believe what they just heard, especially Annette, who collapses to the ground. Charlotte goes on to explain her reasons, and after talking with Sensei last night, she thought about who would choose for a long time, and that led her to realize something. Well, initially she was leaning towards picking others since she always sang to her when she felt sad. She now recalls that he sang to her even when she wasn't sad. He was even singing last night as well, and he never said he was in love with her, so he probably just wanted before his newest song for someone, and Charlotte just happened to be available to listen, and Gomez is no goes well since he smells awful. The king asks Charlotte to reconsider chose a husband, which seems like an odd thing to be worried about after she declared her intentions to kick the bucket with Sensei. Charlotte snaps back at Thomas and tells him that it was a foolish idea to make her marry someone without asking for her opinion, since she never even wanted to get married in the first place. In the end, Thomas never stopped to consider her feelings at all, but Sensei actually cares about what she thought and respected that it was her decision to make. Sensei now understands why Charlotte chose him, but before he can give a response, Gomez takes off his helmet and says he never would have thought his cover would be blown because of his smell. He then transforms into this true form as a servant of the Dark Lord, and he says he had intended to acquire this kingdom by becoming its king so he could eventually hand it over to the Dark Lord. But his plan has been ruined since Charlotte saw through his disguise. Sensei looks over to Charlotte and asked her if she had figured out Gomez was a demon, but she had no idea whatsoever. She just said he smelled because he really does stink. That means Gomez just blew his cover for no reason, but he doesn't want to admit that he was mistaken, so now that his cover is blown, he says he will just kill them all. This is the exact kind of situation where a powerful priestess would be really helpful, but she is still currently unconscious, so Tama tries waking her up while Gomez is distracting with the guards. Unfortunately, the guards don't last very long, so Tama is forced to grab Annette's body and run to avoid being crushed by it. Since Annette will be waking up anytime soon, Tama decides to take matters into her own hands and fight Gomez herself. She's currently level 14, so she should be able to handle herself while on a fight, since she'll be fighting Otto Office to play her song since he's level 89 and normally a buff applied to her, but it turns out that Otto just playing his newest song and it has no effects attached to it, other than it being a certified hit classic according to Sensei. Tama has no other choice but to begin attacking on her own, so Gomez charges at her. Tama ducks underneath and kicks him across the face. She then follows it up with a cat punch, but it didn't really do much damage to Gomez, so he is able to send Tama flying. He then says he will put everything he has into his next attack and tear Catgirl to shreds. But before he does that, Sensei gets his attention and asks Gomez to please eliminate him and Charlotte first. Gomez doesn't think Sensei is serious at first, but Sensei reiterates that now that Charlotte has broken free from her idiotic father's control, her first wish is to end it all alongside Sensei, and Sensei is always up for a good chance to kick the bucket, so he asked Gomez to grant him this favor. Gomez agrees to kill him, but he says that if he does that, he will go on to kill the king, and then he will go in the city to the ground while killing every last citizen inside it. Sensei doesn't really care what Gomez does since he will be dead by then anyway, but Charlotte is starting to have second thoughts about dying. As Gomez begins charging at them, she tells Sensei that she can't let herself die yet, since she wants to stay alive and protect the kingdom. Sensei is like to hear that Charlotte finally understands what she really wants, so since she wants to stay alive, he pushes her out of the way so that he's the only one who will be pulverized. As Gomez continues to charge straight at Sensei, Charlotte tries to convince him not to let himself get impaled, but luckily, at the same time, Annette had just woken up and she uses her power to cast a barrier of light in front of Sensei and shield him from Gomez's strike. She has vowed not to let Sensei die as long as she's by his side, so as Gomez tries to break through her shield, he ends up shattering his horns in the process, and now Gomez is defenseless. Tama is able to land a blow that sends him flying through the castle wall and into the lake. Both Tama and Annette are relieved that they managed to survive, and since Annette really helped her out during the battle, Tama feels the need to thank her. Annette thanks Tama as well for her help, and the two of them seem to be getting along a lot better now, and Otto is still here, just playing his heart without a care in the world. Charlotte has a lot to think about after what just happened, but suddenly her father runs up to her and starts begging for forgiveness for not considering her feelings earlier. Sensei was right when he said Thomas isn't fit to be king, and he now realizes that he's not fit to be Charlotte's father, so he sincerely asks her Charlotte if she is willing to forgive. Charlotte gets down and tells her father that she forgives him. From now on, she would like to talk to him a lot about the future of this kingdom and themselves. Thomas is really happy that he was able to reconcile with Charlotte, and Charlotte is happy her father finally understands her, but all Sensei can think of is how Annette and Tama messed up his perfect chance to get game over. A while later, Thomas acknowledged that he wasn't fit to rule as king, so he abdicated the throne to Charlotte, who now has everything of power to make sure the kingdom is kept safe, and Otto is still making songs since he's got nothing better to do. Meanwhile, Annette and Tama are busy dragging Sensei's coffin to their next destination, and they are talking about how bold it was for Charlotte to become the queen at the age of 16, but they are sure it will work out somehow. Sensei gets out of the coffin and says what's important is that Charlotte made the decision for herself and she's standing by it, which is something that Sensei thinks is beautiful. The story continues. We see after driving Sensei for a long time, Tama asks Annette that they can take a break since she's gotten really tired. It covered a considerable amount of distance, so Annette thinks it's okay if they take a little break since they stopped. Sensei opens the coffin and asks if it is time to eat yet. Annette offers him some bread, but Sensei says he only eats boiled tofu, so if she doesn't have any, he's just going to go back to sleep. After the break, Tama asks how much longer it will take before they arrive at her house, and since Annette is the one with the map, she says it looks like it will take a few more days before they get to her hometown, but before that Annette asks to make a stop at this Swighten temple. Tama doesn't mind the delay, but she asks why Annette needs to go there, prompting her to start explaining the Isekai process. Normally, otherworlders arrive in this world through one of the 4 temples and head to fight the Dark Lord from there, but since Sensei's goal is to find Sakshan rather than defeating the Dark Lord, Annette wants to head to the temples to see if they can gather any information regarding Sakshan whereabouts. If they are unlucky, they might end up having to travel across the whole world, but Annette totally ready to leave everything behind for Sensei. In all honesty, she doesn't want Sensei to fight the Dark Lord even though it's her job to convince otherworlders to do it. She just doesn't want Sensei to be exposed to that kind of danger, so Tama trades her for being in love with Sensei. Annette denies any impure intentions even if it's painfully obvious at this point. She tries claiming that Sensei gave her a breath of fresh air when she was beginning to give up on her job, so she wants to repay the favor and help them find the person he's looking for, that's all. Tama asks if that means Annette would be alright with it if she found out Sakshan was actually Sensei's lover or something, but while the mere thought of Sensei having a lover is painful, she still wants to confirm for herself it turns out to be true. By the way, Tama wonders if Annette will even be allowed to enter this Swighten temple since she kind of ditched her job to go on this journey. Annette doesn't think it's going to be an issue since she's good friends with the person in charge of this Swighten temple, and it's not like she just abandoned her post either since she had her familiar send in an official resignation letter for her, and coincidentally, that same familiar is back and currently chewing on Sensei's head. After healing Sensei, Annette complains that her familiar is always causing problems for her, and now that she says it out loud, she realizes it might have been a bad idea to leave the delivery of her resignation letter to this thing. Her suspicions are confirmed when it spits up her resignation letter, so now it looks like she abandoned her post without notice, and she blames the familiar for it. Seeing the familiar fail so hard and its one job brings a smile to Sensei's face, since he is a failure as well, so he names it Melos, and Melos takes an instant liking to Sensei, but Sensei doesn't really want a pet, so he just goes back into his coffin. Meanwhile, Annette is freaking out over the fact that she left her post without notice, so the temple is totally going to deny her unemployment later. Just then Mello starts acting a little weird, and before long he runs away, so something is clearly wrong, but it's not until a dragon descends from the mountain top that they realize what Melos was trying to warn them about. The dragon is the strongest monster in the world, so Annette doesn't know what to do, but before the dragon attacks, a girl appears behind Annette and Tama, and she tells Ryuka to quit attacking random people. The girl then walks up to the dragon and begins petting it, so Annette and Tama are pretty confused by point. They'd never heard of someone managing to tame a dragon before, so they ask who the girl is. However, she just turns to them and says there are a lot of monsters in the area, so they should hurry up and leave before they get hurt. In fact, it looks like one of their teammates has already died. Annette apologizes for the confusion and clarifies that Sensei is still very much alive. He's just a weird otherworlder, so he enjoys sleeping in a coffin. As soon as the girl hears that Sensei is an otherworlder, a switch flips in her head, so she removes her cloak and revealing that she's a dragon girl, and says she will kill all other welders. The amount of power coming from her body is intense, and she fires a blast at them. Annette is just barely able to hold it back for a couple of seconds with her shield, but her shield isn't strong enough, as the blast still does a lot of damage. They are left sprawled out on the floor, and they realize the dragon girl's power is far superior to theirs, but they are still determined to protect Sensei at all costs, so they get up to fight once more. However, the dragon girl has grown impatient with their meddling, so she uses her intense pressure to force them to the ground, and while they are unable to move, the girl stands over them, giving Annette a clear view of the mark on her neck, which she recognizes to be the mark of the wrathful Dark Lord. The Dark Lord is about to finish off Annette and Tama, but before she does, Sensei gets up and says there's no need for her to be so violent towards the others. He said her beef was with other welders, and that means the person she wants to eliminate is him. He tells her she's free to do whatever she likes to him, and since he isn't putting up a fight, the Dark Lord agrees to leave the others alone, and in the next moment, she punches a hole straight through Sensei's chest. As Sensei falls to the ground, the Dark Lord declares that her name is Waldelia, and she tells Sensei to rest in peace, but as she is leaving, Sensei gets back up and begins to laugh the fact that Waldelia actually stabbed him. He can tell that she's harboring hatred within her heart, since he once felt the same and wanted to stab someone. He even went as far as to write a threatening letter at the time, so he knows what it feels like to be consumed by hatred. Waldelia is starting to get weak out at this point, but Sensei keeps getting closer and touches her cheek, hitting her with that dying man riz. He says he would love to hear her story, but Waldelia isn't going to fall for his charm so easily, so she calls for Ryuka to get her out of here before she gets rizzed up. After she's gone, Sensei collapses once more since she still has a hole in his chest, but Melos is still around, so he finally makes himself useful and drags all of them to the temple, and upon seeing the poor condition Annette is in, Isha rushes to check on her, but Annette asked her to take care of Sensei first because he is in much worse condition. Isha sees it's really bad, so she calls for every healing potion and available priest to help Sensei recover. By the next day, Sensei is back up to full health, but you can't have that, so the first thing he does is go out and buy a bottle poison to drink. While he does that, Annette thanks Isha for all her help and said she'll make sure to repay the favor someday. For now, Annette asks if Isha has come across another world named Sakchan by any chance, but she has never heard of her, so Isha assumes she must have been summoned to another temple. More importantly, Isha asks Annette why she's traveling with an otherworlder all of a sudden. She was shocked when she heard that Annette did her job, but she was also kind of relieved since she knew Annette was too kind-hearted to be exposed to this kind of job. However, she can't support Annette's decision to travel with an otherworlder since she should know from first-hand experience that they are all pretty much scumbags. They are given divine gift to defeat the Dark Lord. Yet all of them call their gifts overpowered skills and use them for dumb things like starting a failing rap career. This goofball is called Kotaro, and he was unfortunately given the power to destroy the world's economy by mass-producing gold coins. He offers to buy the girls whenever they want in return for some fun time, but Isha throws his gold back in his face and tells him to leave because she's having a serious conversation over here. Kotaro was annoying, but he helped prove Isha's point that other welders aren't good people. Annette tries to explain that Sensei isn't like the rest of the other welders, but Isha doesn't believe it since Sensei's face says he's a destructive person. She mourns Annette that being around Sensei will ruin her, but Annette doesn't think Sensei is a bad influence since she is sure she has changed for the better ever since met Sensei, but her argument about Sensei being a good influence doesn't sound very convincing when he comes over to her asking for money to buy drugs, and she happily gives him as much money as he needs to, so Isha thinks Annette might be too far gone already. If Annette is already this attached to Sensei, it should at least wants to know what kind of gift he has, but she's surprised when Annette tells her Sensei doesn't have a gift, and despite not having a gift, he still put himself in harm's way to protect her and Tama from the Dark Lord, but this statement shocks Isha even more, as the Dark Lord was reportedly killed 7 days ago by some other worlders. We then see the bloodstained throne of the former Dark Lord and the other worlder who killed the Dark Lord sitting on it, and from a distance, Waldelia looks on squaring to avenge her father's death. A while later, Annette meets with Tama and informs her of the news that the Dark Lord was already slain 7 days ago. If she received the news from the church yesterday, and that's a wonderful thing since it means peace and finally come to Zauberberg, but if it's true that the Dark Lord is dead, then who is the one who tried to kill them earlier? Annette doesn't know the answer to that question, and now that Tama thinks about it, didn't Sensei also show up 7 days ago? If the Dark Lord had already been defeated by them, then why was Sensei still summoned to this world? Just then, Sensei tears up his papers and collapses in the floor, so Tama asks what's wrong with him now. He explains that he's been trying to write about the events that have occurred since he arrived in this world, but he's struggling to find the words. Annette asked if he wrote anything about her, but Sensei says he didn't write about her at all. If anything, he got a surge of creativity after meeting Waldelia, so he would like to experience something similar to spark his creativity, but Tama says she's not going to do anything dangerous with him. Annette suggests they all go out and just town to relax and considering her future with Sensei, and are a few things Annette would like to buy for him. Upon entering town, Annette buys a huge set of heavy armor for Sense and makes sure he doesn't die, and Sensei doesn't really mind it since the tight feeling reminds him of his coffin. With Sensei's safety ensured, Annette and Tama head off to do some more shopping, so she asks Sensei not to go anywhere while they are gone. A while later, Isha is walking through town where she sees a couple kids gathered around the suit of armor, and she's shocked to find Sensei snugly sitting inside, ignoring the question of why he's in such huge armor, and she says there's something she wanted to talk to Sensei about. She says that from now on Annette is going to be staying with her, and she believes staying with Sensei will ultimately make her unhappy. She tells Sensei to dissolve his party with Annette immediately, but Sensei just grins and tells her that Annette is the only one who can decide whether she wants to stay with him or not, so it's not up to Isha to decide for her. Besides, how can Isha be so sure that Sensei will make Annette unhappy when she knows nothing about him? But the fact that he's an otherworlder is all the proof she needs to know that Annette would be better off without him. Just then they hears an unsettling sound, and as she goes to investigate, she finds Kotaro introducing another otherworlder, Suzuki, to the people. Suzuki tells the crowd that the Dark Lord has finally been defeated, so they all begin to cheer for the otherworlders who gave them their freedom and the Dark Lord. Suzuki corrects the crowd since he wouldn't exactly call this being freed, it's more like they are under new management. He clears it from now on, this world will be ruled by the otherworlders and Suzuki will be taking over this town, so he demands all the people kneel to him. Just then, Kotaro spots Annette and tells that she's one of the elves who smacked coins in his face, so Suzuki gets up and yells at her for daring to harm an otherworlder, and he's going to make sure she never does something like that again. The story continues. We see after placing his hand on Annette's head, Suzuki activates his skill, and within moments, Annette's eyes go dark as she falls under his control. Something is clearly wrong, so once Tama realizes that Suzuki has done something to Annette, she grabs Kotaro by the jacket and demands to know what happened to her. Kotaro snickers and tells her that there's nothing she can do now that Suzuki's skill has been activated, because it turns anyone he pets into his mindless slave. Tama is enraged, so she threatens to beat Kotaro up until he gets Suzuki to turn Annette back to normal, but before she could do that, Suzuki had already put his hand on top of her head and used his ability to turn her into an obedient slave as well. Things have gotten out of hand, so Isha finally comes out and confronts Suzuki for misusing his ability when she taught him to only use it for good, but Suzuki couldn't care less about Isha's disapproval because he's the one with all the power here, and since Isha and the townspeople are so insistent on opposing him, he decides to just destroy the town completely to set an example and rebuild it as a place where no one will dare to stand up to him again. He He then turns to leave, but before he does, he turns to Isha and tells her he will be taking over her church and using it as his castle from now on. The attack dogs proceed to destroy the town under Suzuki's orders, including Tama, who is currently attacking the suit of armor Sensei is stuffed into earlier. Sensei isn't alarmed in the slightest by Tama's robbing behavior, and in fact he finds it amusing that Annette was actually right about him needing armor in case of emergencies like this. Eventually, Tama punches deal enough damage to shatter the plating of the armor, but in the process she causes the helmet to go flying straight into her face, which knocks her out instantly. Sensei is now free from the armor, and since Tama is unconscious on the ground, he does the only thing he can think to do and stuff her in a barrel so she doesn't hurt anyone. After he does this, Isha comes crashing into the building beside him, and for once she's actually relieved to see Sensei's face, but she still stands firm on her earlier statements, as Suzuki is a prime example of what otherworlders are like. Not only did Suzuki use his gift for his own selfish desires, but his greed has also led him to become a danger to society. The power from his gift must have gone straight to his head since he wasn't like this when he first arrived in this world. Initially, he was a shy and weak-willed man, but now he has turned into a monster. Hearing Isha describe Suzuki's descent into evil gives Sensei the spark of inspiration he has been looking for, so he asked Isha where Suzuki is right now, and he is informed that Suzuki should be in the church right now, so he asks Isha to watch Tama while he goes to see Suzuki. Isha tells him to wait since it's crazy for Sensei to go after a hero and doesn't have a gift, but Sensei still insists on going since he believes Suzuki's story will be an interesting topic to write about, so Isha relents and says she will go with him to ensure his safety. As they arrive at the church doors, Sensei is excited, but Isha can't understand how Sensei is so calm in a situation like this. He is already seeing what Suzuki's gift is capable of doing, so he should know that he stands no chance of winning it on this fight. If Sensei opens the door without a plan, she tells him he will be torn apart by Suzuki's beasts, but as she says this, Sensei pulls a bottle of poison out from his sleeve. Isha is impressed since she believes that Sensei must be planning to use poison to take out the beasts, but to her shock, he just shows the entire thing in one gulp. Since they can't use the poison anymore, Isha gets down on all fours and tells Sensei that they are going to have to use the back door now, but once again Sensei doesn't listen to her and walks straight through the front door. Sensei greets the Suzuki and tells him that he is interested in writing a novel about his story, so Suzuki thinks Sensei is a fan of his, wishing to document his heroic deeds, but the reality is quite the contrary, as Sensei says that the story he wishes to write is about a loser who is given more power than he deserved and ultimately turned into a scumbag. Suzuki feels insulted, so he orders his dogs to rip Sensei to shreds, and Sensei is still just standing there, so Isha takes it upon herself to defend him. She casts a spell that fires lasers into the dog's head, but eventually she is overwhelmed, so Suzuki orders his remaining beasts to shoot fireballs at Sensei. Since Isha isn't able to protect him, it looks like Sensei is in real danger here, but at the last second the fireballs get deflected by a floating helmet and go flying back at Suzuki. It turns out that Melos was the one making the helmet float, and the fireballs were reflected because the armor is capable of deflecting low-level spells. Kotaro is starting to freak out since it's clear if it's Sensei is blessed by the gods of plot armor, but Suzuki tells him to calm down. Sensei still has one more trick up his sleeve, which is sure to bring Sensei down. He orders his great wolf to attack Sensei, but as the wolf bites into him, it suddenly begins to decay and falls to the ground. Isha can't believe Sensei drinking that bottle of poison actually saved them, and by now Kotaro was 100% sure that Suzuki can't beat Sensei's plot armor, so he takes off running. Suzuki has to admit that Sensei is more formidable than he at first thought, but he still has one more card to play, so he orders Annette to come out and kill them. Annette has no control over her actions, so she charges at Isha with a dagger and nearly stabs her, so Isha is forced to back away, and since she doesn't want to fight Annette, she thinks it's best that they retreat for now. However, Sensei doesn't think that it's going to be necessary since Annette should be strong enough to resist the mind control on her own. Suzuki calls him a fool since his mind control is impossible to dispel once it has been activated, so Annette is due to be his slave for the rest of her life. Yet Sensei still believes Annette is strong enough to overcome it on her own, so he walks right up to her knife and tells Annette that she doesn't have to listen to what Suzuki tells her to do. He seems to be getting through to her since Annette starts holding herself back from stabbing Sensei, and Suzuki doesn't like it one bit. So he uses all his power to try to force her to stab him, but through sheer force of will shows the flashback, Annette is able to overcome the brainwashing by stabbing herself in the leg. The pain snaps her out of it, so she ends up falling into Sensei's arms, and now that Annette is back to her usual self, Sensei asks Isha to treat her leg wound, and Isha is starting to realize that she may have misjudged Sensei as a person. Meanwhile, now that Suzuki knows his ability isn't all-powerful, he realizes that he's going to be held accountable for all his war crimes, and he can't bear the thought of the punishment he will have to endure at the hands of the people he has pressed. So he looks around for the knife and attempts to use it to off himself, but the last second Sensei stops him from stabbing his throat, but not really because he cares about Suzuki's life, he just hasn't finished writing his story yet. He wants Suzuki to tell him all about his life, so Sensei has nothing left to lose. Suzuki starts telling him all about his life back on Earth. He was a high school student who got bullied relentlessly by the bigger kids. He was timid and weak, so he could never truly stand up for himself. He even had thoughts of back-flipping off the roof so he wouldn't have to deal with the bullies anymore, but ultimately he was too much of a coward to go through with it. On his way home that day, a drunk old man bumped into him and then proceeded to yell as if it were Suzuki's fault, so Suzuki was obviously angry, but he still didn't have the will to stand up for himself. Overall, he was a miserable person, which made him a prime target for Truckuen, and before he knew it, he was transported to this world and greeted by Isha as a hero chosen to defeat the Demon Lord. From there he was left to level up on his own and had to fight the wolves before ultimately making them his faithful servants, and once he had command over strong allies, he was finally able to defeat powerful monsters. He believed things were finally getting better for him, but as he walked through town, he realized that despite his newfound power, people here still treated him like an outcast, just like people on Earth. And eventually, the thought that he may end up getting bullied here made and reach his breaking point. He had suffered endless torment on Earth and suddenly found himself being proclaimed a hero, but he had no reason to want to save this new world or be its hero. Although, even when he tried to play the part of a villain, he couldn't even do that. Sensei is pleased with the story Suzuki just told, because it allowed him to finish his novel. It's about a pitiful man who could neither become a hero nor a villain due to his own weakness, is an outcast no matter what world he goes to. So Sensei decides to call the novel Isekai Shikaku, and as he names it, pages from the novel begin floating around Suzuki. Sensei thanks Suzuki for his story since it allowed him to write something he was satisfied, but he still cannot call this a masterpiece, so takes a page from the novel and rips it apart. As he does this, a magic circle appears beneath Suzuki, and both Isha and Annette recognize it to be the summoning circle they use to bring heroes to this world, but this one is acting in reverse, so in a flash of light, Suzuki is unsummoned and sent back to Earth. Annette checks Sensei's status screen and to her surprise, and now says he has a gift when it clearly wasn't there before. Isha realizes that it must be some kind of special skill that only activates against other worlders, which can only mean Sensei was brought to this world to fight other worlders. After he's done, Sensei collapses to the ground. He's disappointed that he couldn't create a masterpiece like he wanted, and it looks like he is oblivious to the power his writing possesses as he starts wondering what happened to Suzuki. With Suzuki having been reversed isekai, all the monsters under his control stopped being aggressive and began leading the town, and Tama finally gets herself out of the barrel, although she can't figure out why she was in there to begin with. After things go back to normal, Isha thinks Sensei deserves a reward for saving the town from Suzuki, so at his request, she has a custom coffin made for him. Annette thanks Isha for all the help she has offered, but before she goes, Isha says there's something important she would like to discuss with Annette. She tells Annette that it is very likely that Sensei is an incredibly important hero to this world, and that means traveling with him is bound to be insanely dangerous. But after seeing the willpower Annette possesses, Isha believes Annette can handle any challenges that come her way, so she asked her support Sensei to the best of her ability. After that, the group is ready to continue their journey, so Tama and Annette both grab the ropes to be inhaling Sensei's coffin, but before they go, Isha says she has a question for Sensei. It's true that Suzuki turned out to be a rotten hero, but considering the fact that he was nice before he was given his powers and exposed to this world, she can't help but feel like he only turned out that way because he was summoned, and now that he has been sent back to Earth, he may be doomed to continue his miserable life. However, Sensei sees it differently, since while Suzuki's story as a hero of this world is over, his story on Earth is still in progress, and it's up to him to change things for the better. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.